right, it's drum roll. Who's gonna do it? Who's gonna blink first? This is Slashers, your new favorite podcast about your new favorite horror media. My name is Jake, obviously back on caffeine. With me, as always, are my esteemed colleagues, co-hosts, and cohorts, Jason and Mikey, who's only wearing panties. Say hello to the mutant goons from beyond.
Hello, mutant goons. And I didn't say I'm only wearing panties. I just I'm not wearing pants.
He's news anchoring it tonight, guys. He's just wearing a shirt with jean shorts under there.
Jorts.
Jorts
Were meant for John Cena and Daisy Dukes only. Anybody else appropriating, that's racist.
Oh, goodness. But yes, hello everybody in podcast land and now YouTube land, because we're gonna start focusing some more love on YouTubes.
I love YouTube.
I love YouTube.
I think everyone loves YouTube. I think YouTube is essentially everybody's parents now, because if I need to learn how to do something, I'll just go to YouTube and I'll learn it from you.
For sure. 100%. Like, I'm looking at the air conditioning unit that I learned how to fix from YouTube. I fixed it, and then the guy comes because I forgot that I called. I couldn't call it off in time, and so I'd already fucking fixed it. And the guy comes and he's like, "Man, did you used to do HVAC work?" And I was like, "No, I have YouTube." And he goes, "I'm hearing that all the time." And so I just felt guilty and had him install a float switch just because I was like, "Well, you're fucking here. I might as well."
Essentially, YouTube took our jobs. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, yeah. My dad never taught me shit about HVAC or anything. So, yeah.
Well, YouTube is great for everything. If I didn't have, because, people they get kind of touchy, like, "Oh, I don't let my kids watch YouTube because whatever. But I'm like, if I didn't let Olivia watch YouTube, she probably wouldn't know her ABCs by the time she was like 3.
That's what a really frustrating thing when people get super uppity about screen time. I don't know if uppity is a racist term, but I think it's a bad term. So people get riled up, let's say, about screen time. Because like, I was raised by wolves. I just was left in a room with a television most of my life, right? And it's like, honestly, the cable guy, not that far off. I just don't have a lisp. But I was telling my wife, like, in terms of like relative imagination, kids can only really extrapolate to the parameters that they have most of the time, because kids can't generally, there are obviously exceptions, but play in a world that they aren't have some kind of familiarity with, some parameters for. And that's one of the great things. Like, if my kid watches Muppet Babies, she can go to ancient Egypt, she can go to the moon, she can go to the Cretaceous period, and then she can use that in her real life play. Do you guys have that experience with your children?
Currently, he's on a big Bluey kick, and Miss Rachel is another YouTube popularity that he's a big fan of on YouTube.
I don't know who Miss Rachel is. What's she all about?
She's like a sort of like I think she got, I guess, kind of big in the pandemic. She does a lot of songs. She has lots of people come on and Muppets and stuff, and she tries to help out with their speaking a little bit.
Okay.
So he's a big fan, and he just likes music. Graham just likes music all the time. That's all he wants to listen to. Like, even when we'll play like a show that he likes, like for Bluey, like he'll stop everything he's doing as soon as the intro music. Exactly. But then as soon as that song's over, he'll go back to whatever he was doing sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise for me was I have a wine bottle like holder, I guess, in my living room, and it's shaped like the Eiffel Tower. And one random day, Olivia was like, "Oh, that's the Eiffel Tower." And I was like, I have never mentioned that. And I don't know where she got that from. And I saw that she was watching some YouTube video of some cartoon that took place in Paris. And I was like, that's where she got it from.
So long as it's not fancy butt fucking Nancy. I hate that little C word. Have you ever watched that shit?
Is that the one that always has to go to the bathroom and never does?
I don't know if that's the case. She does like, "C'est magnifique. That's fancy for blah, blah, blah."
Oh, no.
And so great for verbiage. Some awesome dictation that comes out of my daughter has a few like 10-penny words that she learned from it. But the frantic flopping of her hands and running around, it's like she's got the vapors and stuff. I hate it. She's a C word.
The vapors.
No, I haven't seen that one. I thought you were talking about, there's this one that like real quick clips and it's cartoons and it's like a potty godmother fairy thing. No, Perry. I don't know. Anyway, she always has to go to the bathroom. She always has to take a shit or something. And it's like her in class or like her in the car. And she's like, I got to take a shit, but like in children language.
Sure.
And they're like, I knew I should have gone before I left. And then like a fairy godmother appears and she's like, oh, honey, we must find the nurse bathroom. And it's just really funny because I'm like, when you're of a certain age, you know not to fuck around with leaving without going to the bathroom. You don't have to learn this at age 5.
But honestly, that Daniel Tiger shit, like we kind of skipped it with my daughter and then tried it for my son. And now my daughter's super into it. And they have a whole like potty song of like, hey, don't shit your pants. And when you do potty, wash your hands first instead of smearing shit all over your dad's face. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah. And also there was a toothbrushing one that, you know how you're supposed to brush your teeth for like 2 minutes or whatever?
Yeah.
It's a toothbrushing video. And the song's actually really cute. And you put the toothpaste on the toothbrush and she starts brushing her teeth. And it's like, brush the something. And like they're supposed to mimic what the video does. Then a whistle appears and it's like, time to go to the top teeth. And so that really helps out on YouTube. Thanks, YouTube.
Yeah. We've banned Coco Melon in our house preemptively.
Oh my God.
We've not, the kids don't know anything about it. We're going to try to keep it that way as best we can because everybody that I know that has kids and have sucked into the Coco Melon thing, it's just been ridiculous and they hate it so much.
Dude, I've seen a bunch of ads for like Coco Melon Live and On Ice, and they're fucking haunting. Like, I remember seeing like the Rugrats giant mascot type creatures. This is even worse than that. It just looks like they have fetal alcohol syndrome, and I want to burn them with fire.
Is it worse than the Ninja Turtles coming out of their shell tour?
Dude, how you put some fucking respect on that name? I listen to that soundtrack to this day.
You know what's kind of fucked up, Buck? So, you know, one of my kids really likes Cocomelon, and I don't mind it. I'm like, whatever, you can watch it. But there's a song of opposites. And one little boy has a cat, one little boy has a dog, one little boy likes to play outside, one little boy likes to play inside. It just weirds me out. But one of the boys is white and the other one's black.
Oh,
and I'm like,
so this is like the old Star Trek episode where one honky's white on one side and black on the other. Then the other one's black on that side and white on the other. And you're like, we can't get along, dog.
Well, it's like, so they have there's 2 characters. There's a bunch of characters, a bunch of little kids in the show. One little boy's JJ's the white one and Cody's the black one. But I'm like, don't put them together in the opposite song because we don't want to drive that divide more than it already is.
Sure. We're actually the same. That's not opposite. That should be the point, is that it should be the black and the white kid on one side and then the Republican on the other. Am I right? Welcome.
Jake, our listeners don't like for us to get too political now.
Dude, it's hard not to get political. But what's crazy is like I've been talking to some of my conservative friends and they've even made me feel sane. Like when it comes to Supreme Court stuff and everything, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I've always been very liberal and I feel like I've gotten more and more radical. But it's also, I think that California conservative is still so incredibly liberal compared to the rest of the country where I'm like, I'm in a fucking safe place generally. Like even with Roe v. Wade overturning, that's really a federalism issue. And so my state is still a nice, generally blue, generally polite area.
You should come to mine, Mikey State, and see how that's going over. See how far right it goes over here.
Well, I don't know how it's going to play out, but apparently I read that my city specifically was going to, because they can't, of course, like overthrow anything federal. But I don't know how it works. But there was an article about how they're talking about decriminalizing abortion specifically in my city. Don't know if that's a thing, but that's what's being talked about right now.
So basically, that's what happens with Roe v. Wade. So not to get overly lawyerly about this, but it does not in and of itself say that abortion is illegal. Basically, what it does is it removes federal protection, and thereby the premise for it is basically, hey, this is a state's issue, which is something that a lot of conservative rhetoric has used. And honestly, that is not a terrible idea in concept, but in practice, marginalized populations get exploited to no end because they don't have enough of a populace to take over a state. That's why generally federal protections have come in for, let's say, civil rights and things of that nature. So in this situation, the argument is, hey, this is not shouldn't be a federal issue. This should be a state's issue or even a municipality's issue. But you see those pitfalls. It's really frustrating for me to see because a lot of other decisions and a lot of other freedoms and privileges are by analogy, protected with stuff like Roe v. Wade. And you really have that. it's exhausting rhetoric that you hear and you kind of want to get away from arguments like that, but the quote unquote slippery slope that you do have to, kind of look at with those issues. But, we're on the topic of abortions. Let's talk about people slamming wieners and vaginas together that lead to those abortions. And specifically, let's talk about the wieners and vaginas from 1964 in Japan. Yeah.
I'm all about it. All about it. Now, are they pixelated this time, or were they not pixelated yet in 1964?
Not pixelated. It's 1964. Dun-na, dun-na-na-na-na. Any Oingo Boingo fans? Okay.
In a long time.
I've never been to Australia.
The Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo. Mikey, you need to do yourself a favor. You need to look at, what was it, 76-year-old Danny Elfman, who has got a sicker bod than I do, who recently played a concert, and it was scintillating.
Also married to a Fonda, who's just
Yeah.
retired. Well, I mean, if your husband is a shredded 77-year-old rock star, I guess you don't need to work anymore.
Seriously, dude. And then he still puts out music and still I don't know, creates. It's super weird. And then all the guys from Oingo Boingo still do. I used to go see, there was a great concert every year. I don't know if it still happens, but basically Johnny Votto, John Avila, and a couple of other guys from the original band they'd go to the Grove in Anaheim and they would play a show. And it was some of the most fun I've ever had at a concert. And I never got sucker punched, which is very rare for me with my demographic of music.
Huh. Were you screaming Dead Man's Party the entire time? Play it.
100%. And Private Life. And I mean, I heard that they played the song Heard Somebody Cry, which is one of the best songs ever. Really sets the tone for how dark and haunting Danny Elfman's lyrics and prose would kind of become. He says, basically, I am not a ghost without a soul. Come listen to my heart and feel the beats. Stalk through these homes at night. You feel anyway, it's really good. I butchered it. Mikey, edit that part out because I got a little gun shy, but it's really good stuff.
It's not coming out. But I do have an important announcement to make.
Yeah.
I know you're talking about Bernard Elfman or whatever, but what?
Danny Elfman.
Glover.
Daniel Elfman the first.
Isn't he a music composer for movies?
He is. He did Spider-Man and Edward Scissorhands.
Have you seen the Tim Burton movie?
Mm-hmm.
He did the score for it. He did the score
little
for
indie
it.
director.
Speaking of, Tim
Except
Burton's
Ed Wood.
Wednesday trailer came out, so go check that out. Also, my important announcement is John Carpenter is looking to come out of retirement to make another movie.
Really?
No, I'm fine with him not.
Mhm.
I'm fine with him making music instead.
Is it Ghosts of
No.
Mars too?
Oh, Electric Boogaloo, baby.
Yeah.
No, actually, it's he's looking at revisiting the vampire series that he was going to start.
Son of a bitch. I actually love that fucking movie unironically too, but I fucking hate James Woods. How is it that the Cosmos are trying to fuck me with this?
I'm just
Really?
kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
He is coming out of retirement, but I was
You
trying
knew
to
that
think,
would rile me up. This mischievous little impish grin on your fucking face. Jesus.
In his defense, James Wood is good in that movie.
He's great. When he's goading the priest, he's like, "Hey, Padre, you got a little wood there?" And it's like, that's fucked up. You can't be saying that. You're an adult man. Of course you didn't give him an erection. But
oh my goodness. I do love
Ooh.
James Woods though. But speaking about things that are not woods and more like fields of reeds, today we are reviewing Onibaba from 1964. I wanted to start off just by saying, because this kind of got started because Jake and I were doing Creature from the Black Lagoon. I really love doing this black and white segment, Slashers After Dark, Hot Daddy Top Slashers, or whatever you said we were called. And then I was like, well,
Dilps, which is Dads I Like to Podcast. We did Gonads. Remember that one where there's about 1,000 different ones that we could fit that abbreviation. But honestly, I mean, Jason's a dad too. I think simplicity is very appealing to this modern demographic with the attention span of a gnat. So let us know in the comments, slasherspod@gmail.com. Would you like this subset of show to be Dilps? Keep going, Mikey.
Yeah. And that's also why I was like, we have to bring Jason on, because Jason also is a dad on the podcast.
Very true.
We didn't forget about you, Jason. We love you.
I appreciate it.
And also, so we were thinking about black and white movies, and we selected one that we ended up not doing, but we will resume probably next week in doing
So
it
fucking stoked about that too, though.
because it's going to be really fun. We'll tell you about it afterwards, Jason.
All right.
It's our first twofer episode.
Yes.
Because at one point we were talking about calling this subset of show the analog analogs, which is to say analog in terms of like retro, media,
Sure.
but also analog in the literal term of it being a counterpoint. So we would be taking an old thing and comparing it to a new thing. And so the next episode we will be doing that, even though I think I can confidently say we're dilps, but keep going.
Yes, the dilps. But yeah, so I remember Onibaba. I remember seeing Onibaba. I'd never seen it before until we had to watch it for the podcast. And I messaged Jake and I said, hey, I want to also do Onibaba. And I think, Jake, have you heard about it before?
I had heard the name, never really committed it to memory. One of those things where like you see imagery, and especially like the iconic image of the Oni mask behind me, you see a lot. I love, yokai, Onis, stuff like that. So aware of it, but had never seen it. And I thought, of course, there's movies that you see it in the backdrop of your life that is kind of part of like a cultural zeitgeist where you're like, okay, I got it. There's nothing that's going to get me on this and nothing that surprised me but I was so fucking wrong. So I was so stoked when you mentioned this because I realized just how I hadn't seen it and how like empty I was in that like niche of my brain. And also, my wife went to see some fucking Moulin Rouge thing or something where she had to leave the house. And so I had like time to watch a movie with subtitles without distractions. So that's why I was like, fuck next week's episode. I need to do this now because this is just the lightning striking twice for me to be able to have this time to myself.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I guess we're doing it this week because I remember seeing the image showed up somewhere and I was like, what is that? That's creepy. And I think it may have been like a Criterion sell.
Yep.
And I saw the cover and I said, let me look into that. And I did. And I always made a mental note, I should watch that because I love old black and white horror films. And I haven't seen too many old Asian in general horror films.
Yeah.
Usually just like the 90s till like current is the kind of films I've watched that are foreign. So I was like, that'll be interesting to see. The only thing I've seen from the 70s is Dragon Ball. So, which in a weird way has a very similar aesthetic. It's not what?
It's 80s.
Oh, I thought it was 70s. Are you sure?
Yeah, I could see why you would think that, especially given the original Maka Fujiki adventure theme song, but I can assure you it's the 80s. I'm very much a fan. Dragon Ball is my favorite of the shit, which makes shopping for that merchandise fucking terrible on the internet because even if you put in Dragon Ball, it's like, well, did you want Dragon Ball GT too? And I'm like, no, I just put in Dragon Ball. And Google's like, I'm pretty sure you wanted Dragon Ball GT.
We all know you're a big General Rildo fan from Dragon Ball GT, Jay. We all know.
My fucking God. I am finally more than halfway through GT. It has taken me over 20 fucking years to get this far. And the only way I can stand it is to do it in Japanese with subs, which, as you can tell based on this movie, I don't get that opportunity very often. Because I cannot. There's something fucking weird about Sean Schemmel and his awful fucking every voice is bad. Sabbath's voice is bad in it, and they all sound like they're trying to be cool. Like I used to do improv, right? And we would go into a scene, and if I wanted to be like generic cool guy, I would be like, "Yeah, I'm a cool guy," and that's Goku's Super Saiyan 4 voice, and I fucking hate it. But anyway, Mikey, I've
and it's like backtrack too. It's so weird.
It's so fucking bad, dude. But the Japanese, it sounds like the other stuff to me. Also, the music's not as good. But Mikey, I have to insist that you keep going. I apologize. I've derailed. And Jason and I can veritably do Dragon Ball. We could do Dilp Dragon Ball anytime.
Sure. Absolutely.
Also, Jason, you might like this. Mikey's muted, so I'm not going to worry about talking right now. My wife, for my birthday, which is coming up, got me an All Might shirt where he is vomiting blood. Christopher Sabat. So I don't think I hate all Sabat. I just hate GT Sabat.
He was actually just at a con here recently in Raleigh.
Super fucking nice guy. Because you might remember that I interviewed Jason Douglas. Jason Douglas is a fucking sweetheart. I love that guy. It was one of my favorite talks I've ever had on the show. He plays Beerus. He knows Chris. Just glowing things to say about him. I hope to meet them in person one day.
Nice.
Well,
Mikey, did I
first of
fill enough
all-
time? Are you now that you're unmuted?
Well, no, I'm gonna stay muted because I have gunk in my throat because my allergies are really bad. So
Ugh.
I'm muting myself so you don't hear me constantly like clearing my throat.
Can you do the signal like keep going, and not that I'm just being long-winded? I'd appreciate that. Now that we're on YouTube, they can see the cues, buddy.
I'm fine. Anyways, what was supposed
No,
to just
I won't
take
do that.
well, see, this is why I want you to cross and zap me one day. I just sometimes just move on. I just wanted to take 2 minutes to talk about it. Everybody fucking heard about this movie to begin with, but now we're talking about, by the way, I like Dragon Ball also, and I can also talk about it. So to segment me out of this conversation and say you and Jason could do that, it's a little homophobic, to be honest.
It's not, because Jason and I have already done this.
Are gay.
So that's one of
Oh.
the reasons. No, Jason and I are probably a little gay for each other, because honestly, Jason and I, if it's not a slashers host or a former host, I don't talk to that person basically. And Jason and I have a long running side text where it's just like fucking anime. Oh, here's a picture of my cute kid. Here's a lot more anime. Oh, did you see this horror shit? Nah, me neither. Fuck modern horror. And we just keep moving on. But Mikey, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is your favorite? What is your favorite Dragon Ball of all the Dragon Balls?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I started watching Dragon Ball from the beginning.
Okay.
So it's like 160 episodes, I think. So I'm like not even close to being done. And then I saw Dragon Ball Z when it was on Cartoon Network, or what's it called? Not
Toonami?
Tsunami. Yes,
Yeah, Toonami, which is on Cartoon Network. It came on like after schools, like 6
Toonami
o'clock or
fucking
something.
rules, dude.
Yeah.
As a dog person, I can freely admit I fucking love SWAT cats.
There's a funny video that's like, you knew that you were in school in the late 90s and early 2000s when you woke up to this, and it was like the opening anime song to I forgot what it was. It was an anime that I didn't watch. It wasn't Sailor Moon. It wasn't
Hamtaro.
Maybe. It was a very angry sounding anime song, and so I just thought it was funny because it's happened, falling asleep with the TV on and waking up to that.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so we talked about how Jake heard of Onibaba, talked about how I didn't really hear about it, but I saw it on HBO, so I was like, okay, great. Jason, you have a little bit more of an interesting story than us.
Yeah, so I remember I was sick from school one day. I was in high school, so this is probably around 2004. And I was just like thumbing through the channels. I was home alone, of course, and then I go to the independent film channel, which is that still a channel? Does anybody have? I've been a cord cutter for like almost a decade at this point. Is that still a channel?
I don't know. I see some stuff come out from like IFC Midnight.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's connected, but I think it's on Sling.
Okay, well, it makes sense because I used to put out a lot of stuff too, and I know that Stan versus Evil was on IFC, I think, or Sundance. Anyway, it was on one of those. And I remember, I think I was 15 at the time, so I probably started watching it because of the boobs. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I stayed because this movie was really freaking awesome. It's like 12 o'clock and it's on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm home alone. I was like, this is crazy. What is this movie? I've never even heard of it. And at this point, I'd probably never even watched that many I mean, I had seen Seven Samurai at this point, probably because it's
sick.
I mean, it's same as Seven Samurai. Kira Kurosawa is pretty fucking awesome. But
he's also Star Wars. Google it. He's Star Wars. Keep going.
Oh yeah, he absolutely is. And George Lucas almost bought the rights at one point.
As a guy who loves Willow and kind of likes Star Wars as a kid, it's incredibly frustrating where I'm like, plagiarism, but I kind of like it.
But I will give him props. Luke Skywalker is not in Hidden Fortress. Every other character in Star Wars is in Hidden Fortress. Luke Skywalker is not. So
the
Chewbacca.
Generic, hero's journey character is his own creation that he also stole from the ancient Greeks. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, and I remember, so I remember sitting back, being sick, and just watching this movie and thinking like, this is pretty awesome. I'm glad I was sick today. I never would have watched it without this. And I watched it again probably 6 or so years ago because I saw it on Hulu one day. This was back when Hulu used to have like all the Criterion movies.
Oh
before.
yeah, that was a great time.
It was like that was the actual golden age of streaming. This is not the golden age of streaming at all.
Yeah. We've
back
had
when it was
pretty
just
precipitous drop off for sure.
Yeah, back when it was just Netflix and Hulu, that was the golden age of streaming for sure.
As a parent, Disney Plus did me a lot of favors. As a consumer of media, that it was a very, very cognizable issue where a lot of streaming and right before the Fox acquisition, where you started to see all sorts of good shit just slowly seep away. And I think that now we're basically in the old cable days, but keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched it again, and I remember I watched it, and I was like, "This is still pretty awesome." Why don't more people talk about this movie? Like, I know it's in the Criterion Collection, so film buffs are going to be aware of this movie. Especially since you realize that, like, and it had a big input or a big legacy because I know Pazuzu, the white face from Exorcist,
Yep.
was influenced by this mask.
100%.
So I was like, and then I watched it again, and I was like, let's watch this in the dark, completely quiet. I remember I was in the bedroom, the baby was asleep, everybody was asleep, and I just watched it. I was like, this is awesome. Watch this in the dark if you get a chance, if you've not watched this movie. It's on HBO Max, like Mikey just said.
Yep.
And then they were like, Jason, you want to do Onibaba with us? I was like, fuck yes, I want to do Onibaba with everybody.
Well, it's so funny. Each of us recreated the same circumstances for watching it, which I don't know the last time I sat down and watched a movie for this show in complete silence, except for the sound, in complete darkness, except for the light of the TV. And you both did the exact same thing. And it feels like that's why we kind of had this transcendent, pseudo religious experience with this movie. Like, this is like all time great for me at this point.
Yeah, this movie was a lot of fun to watch, you know?
Yeah. And one of the things that Jake said was, if you just showed this movie right now, it could totally be taken as a current A24 film.
I stand by that hard, dude. The pacing, the visuals.
But also, because when I was watching it, for some reason, I kept thinking of The Lighthouse, and I was like,
Yes!
this is what
I have a whole
I wish.
diatribe.
I was like, I wish The Lighthouse was like this.
Yes, dude. I don't keep going because I completely agree with you. I have a whole fucking thing about how it's the two characters, the sexual influence of a third, honestly, I cannot imagine that there is a reality in all the cosmos where the director of The Lighthouse hasn't seen Onibaba, and that isn't like a spiritual love letter, if you will, with it being so eerily similar in so many ways. I happen to like this 10 times more than Lighthouse, which is crazy because The Lighthouse is so much more dialed up. And I think we can kind of agree. I generally like stuff that's dialed up. I don't really like the Goonies. I love the Monster Squad. I will admit, Monster Squad comes later. It is a lot of the things that worked in the Goonies ramped up. I like a lot of 80s horror, which is stuff that worked in the, the creature feature era, like the Thing from Another Planet or whatever. And then you got John Carpenter's, you turn it up. But that was just like, I didn't need it turned up. I didn't need it in Technicolor, even though it's monochrome. I loved this movie. What do you guys think? Jason, can you compare it to The Lighthouse?
Oh yeah, see, I didn't even think about Lighthouse. I was thinking like Midsummer kind of way with the way it was all shot and a lot of the landscapes and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of going to. But I didn't. That's absolutely like as fact, this is a three-hander. Just like the Lighthouse was for sure. And it's. Well, yeah, I'm just kind of sitting there trying to ruminate on that. But yeah, that was absolutely very accurate. Comparison there for sure.
Well, yeah, those moments where it's so subdued and it's just two characters working. It's just two, but it feels like this tension is rising the whole time, right? And with Eggers, like there's open antagonism between the two. But then when it comes to this, I feel like that was so interesting because it's almost like the phallic male, the vaginal female, in terms of like the way that they presented that antagonism. Whereas you had the hag in this one basically trying to entice, use her wile and guile and whatever you want to call it to cajole this girl into doing what she wanted, versus with Willem Dafoe, he's so much more pervasive and in your face and domineering. And it's very similar. Like, I don't know if maybe I'm getting into a gender studies argument, but you know what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
If I look at The Lighthouse and the way that Robert Pattinson and William Dafoe, I feel like watching that movie, I felt like I was watching like the top students of NYU's film project, where they got the top students in acting class and was like, hey, play along with the dialogue, improv, you guys are experts, let's make magic. But with Onibaba, I feel everything is on purpose. Maybe they improvise some stuff, but everything just felt so calculated. First of all, even though Lighthouse was black and white, this black and white is on another level because they use lights like the whole film depends on it, which it doesn't, but it just brings it that much more value. The lighting, the shadows, and then you have the two main characters. And when you're talking about character development, I feel like I cared for these characters more than I cared for the lighthouse characters,
Yep.
because this essentially was a family who got told terrible news. And I believe when I was looking at it, I believe this is supposed to take place around the 1400s regarding dueling emperors.
Yep.
Not big on history. I'm sorry, everybody, but that's what I read. So, and so we have basically, and they call her the hag or the old woman, but really she's maybe like in her late 40s, maybe early
Which, I mean, when
50s.
you think about the timetable, like it's more than middle aged.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
I think they said. Oh, I was looking at this movie. They mentioned a general at the time, so this movie was probably based in like 1330, somewhere around their time. So if you're 40, you were old.
Already
Yeah.
almost out. But
Yeah.
the thing is, she's still pretty though. Like,
Yeah.
you see, when you think of hags these days, you think of like, you know, X, the movie X. But like, yeah, she had crazy hair, but like there's a ton of tits in this movie. Well, not a ton, but you see the two main girls' boobs, like
Those 4 tits you see on heavy rotation.
yeah.
Like, I
And
can't sleep without this robe just slightly askew, so I can see all of my deep cleavage. Oh, I'm sorry, my boobs have popped out now. Here, okay.
Well, what I love is it ramps up the tittage, where at first it's
Oh,
like
totally.
kind of a little bit of side titty, and you're like, okay, I'll take that. Like, I'll accept this. This is fine. But then by the end of it, it's like titties out.
It's like we're not
That's
even
what
wearing the robe anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're lucky I'm wearing this crusty diaper panties. That's all.
Yeah, but it's not the weird, it's not pervy, it's beautiful. And like, and I think that's why it throws me off when they're like, keep going, old woman. And it's like, no, she's actually like, she's got a great body.
Well, I think that's one of the things too, is the element of her age is amplified not by how old she is, but by the fact that she's unable, and again, this goes to kind of gender studies, to have another child. It seems to be that's kind of the defining factor of her age. But it also speaks to gender roles significantly, which is a guy is very often looked at as less of a man if he can no longer get an erection, which is a very silly thing when you think about like the physical ramifications something like menopause can have. And I truly think that's one of the elements with her, is saying that her validation as a person, as a grieving mother, is made lesser than because she can't get knocked up. It's so much so that the guy is like, this skeeving fucking douchebag is repulsed at the idea. And I think a certain element, even though he's not talking about procreation, the fact that she isn't even viable in that regard shows how she is perceived, right?
And she certainly doesn't
Yeah.
perceive herself that way at all, because at the beginning of the movie, the I guess the merchant, he's like, he asks, like, I'll give you another bag of millet if if you have sex with me. And then she's like, no, not at all. I'd never do that with you. But
Yeah, that part actually reminded me of Dragon Ball, I'm not gonna lie. With Bulma and the turtle guy.
Oh, Master Roshi.
yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, old Dragon Ball is super horny. I bought a box set, and some of these people left some of the shittiest, evil, mean reviews about how it was like grossly censored. And there's still like Bulma's tits and butt and stuff in it and stuff. Goku's dick in a bunch of places. But where they censored it, which I thought was really interesting, was the exploitative parts, where it was like, let's say Yamcha perving in on her when she's in the van for Oolong's shower, right? There where she's being exploited, it doesn't. But like later on when they're having the mystic tournament and they make the Dracula bleed out his face, it was purposeful. She was a part of the gag, so it changes a little bit. Very interesting to see how the Japanese take censorship and penises and vaginas, and you have pixelated dicks, but then you can have people getting tentacle raped. It's I can't judge.
Well, that may have been censored on the American side, because I think the biggest thing is Bulma's like 15 or 16.
Yes.
Yeah, so it might have been censored on the American side, because I don't know what the age is in Japan, but neither here nor there. So I just want to give some background of them. Well, I don't know. Do you think we should give background on what the movie's about, or do we want to just say go watch it if you haven't seen it?
I think it's okay to give the generalities, and I think it's okay to, say for the next 5 minutes we'll get into spoilers, and then kind of just talk about like imagery and stuff like that we liked, because I think the story itself, I could tell you what happens in the movie. It doesn't matter. It's how it happens. It's how it's presented. That's what matters, because the story is very reserved, but it's the presentation that really makes this a classic to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like for anybody that maybe hasn't watched it yet. Think of it's kind of like the best Tales from the Crypt episode. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
it's stretched out to like 100 minutes long, but it's all about these three people and how they're interacting with each other, and ultimately get their comeuppance. Just kind of like an old EC comic would. That's kind of what I
Yeah.
was thinking at the end of this. It really, really kind of hammered home. Now, I guess this came out after. No, I'm sure he probably didn't read any EC comics when he was making this movie. Who knows if they really got over in Japan at all.
But I do think that careful what you wish for monkey's paw effect really does. That's a very astute kind of observation, which I think is very of its time, where the cautionary tale. I could tell that when you said it was stretched out to 100 minutes, it wasn't like stretched out in a bad way. Like,
oh no, not at all.
Yeah, like the Asylum films where it's like, fuck, there's 5 minutes of movie here and it's stretched out to 90.
Yeah.
It just so happens that like it's taking its time to deliver that message.
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you guys, can y'all think of a children's media that was heavily influenced by this story? Because the one thing came to mind at the end of the film.
I knew this was like kind of also inspired by an old Buddha parable, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of a children. Now, would it be American children's story or?
Yeah. I'll just tell y'all. The Haunted Mask by Goosebumps.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. Or maybe even the Haunted Mask too, because they're old people.
I don't think I read that one or saw. I don't know. Is it a novel or is it a?
It's a novel and an animated TV episode out of it. But the guy wearing it just gets old, very old.
Oh well, that'll be on the Slashers podcast gets lit AF that we do.
Oh, I know. There's this movie. I don't know if you've heard of it. This guy puts on this mask. There's some mysticism involved. It's actually called The Mask.
Oh, yes.
Not familiar.
Smokin'. Oh, come on.
I'm just kidding. Okay, that's
You're supposed
second.
to yes and me, God damn it.
I'm sorry. I've only read the comic book series that is based off of.
Where he's got a motherfucking machine gun and shit.
Yeah, I actually did pick up a comic from them. Like I was like, somebody was like, "Hey, just have this," and I picked it up and I was like, "Okay, this is certainly a comic book that people based the movie on." That's not at all like the comic book.
Same with like the Tick, where you're like, "Oh, go ahead, Mikey."
I was gonna make an aside real quick that you're on your second Jim Carrey reference, so watch out because the third is the last.
Did I reference Jim Carrey? Oh, Cable Guy.
Cable Guy.
Cable Guy. Yeah. He's just so ingrained in my DNA. It's just like the word "the."
Yeah, you remind me of him a lot. But
oh, I had somebody go out of their way to tell me that I look like Cillian Murphy from Peaky Blinders and the Scarecrow from the Nolan trilogy. And it's not the first time I've been told that. Mikey, you've studied my face like none other on this show. Is this person right?
I wasn't studying your face, but
my balls.
I will say Cillian Murphy, when you mentioned it, I can totally see it. But I don't know who Scarecrow from the Nolan series is.
It is Cillian Murphy. That's the point.
Oh. Yeah. Then yeah. I mean, you're a little less English looking.
I'll take umbrage with that, governor.
Isn't Cillian Murphy only like 5'7" also?
Oh, fuck that. I tower over that bitch.
How tall are you? I mean, we'll find out in October, but how tall are you?
6'1", baby.
Oh.
But it's not my vertical length that matters. It's my horizontal length, if you get my drift.
Oh, you don't have to lie on your Tinder profile, do you?
I didn't think you were that fat.
I don't have a Tinder profile. If my wife ever listens to this episode, please do not. I don't
Disclaimer.
have that.
I was just joking.
Of all the episodes, I'm sure she's definitely going to pick the one about the Japanese movie from '64 that she's never seen and has no interest in seeing.
Okay. Yeah. Only grinder for Jake. Only grinder.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, she doesn't have a dick and balls, so she can't be jealous because she just can't offer me that.
And they don't care about height, so.
Yeah. They care about the gape. I'm all about that. Okay. So let's talk about this. You want a funny story? I'll tell you a funny story. So my mom, her grandmother, they called Baba. And so I had always thought about like Baba Yaga and stuff like that. The old croon with the house with the chicken legs. And then you have obviously John
Baba
Wick.
Yaga.
Yep. Whatever. Baba Mega, Baga Mama.
Baba Trenhaga.
Make
Drake.
Baba
Baba great
Drake.
again.
Oh, speaking of people that Jake looks like, but go ahead. Your
I can see it.
grandma.
So anyway, my kids call my mom Baba, and this movie is Onibaba, which is quite literally Oni, demon, Baba, hag. So now every time my kids call my mom Baba, I'm giggling merrily at the idea they're calling her a Japanese hag.
Demon hag.
But also, I think it means woman in just another language also. So she would only be a
Don't
hag
take
if we
my
were in
joy
Japan.
from me.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
My joy is mine and not yours.
Well, speaking of kids saying things, did I tell you all the story already when I took my niece to the zoo like 5 years ago?
No, but I'm listening.
So we were at the zoo, and do you know what a dick is?
It
What
sounds
now?
like a Pokemon.
A dick, it's D-I-K. It's a very tiny deer. Like think of like a deer the size of a chihuahua. And
Okay.
it's super cute. They had them at my zoo, and I was like, oh, I really like to go look at them because I just think they're really cute. And my niece was like 5 at the time. This was like 6 years ago. And she was like, oh, Uncle Mikey, what's that? And I was like, oh, God, well, of course she has to ask me. And I was like, it's called a dick. And she gave me a weird look, and I was like, it says it right there. And she's like, okay. So in this part of the zoo, we were like a part of like the Africa continent animals. And
Toto Lee.
there was a gazelle next. If you are unfamiliar with the gazelle, it looks like a larger version of the dick. And so my niece in front of everybody says, look, there's a big dick.
Yes. Kids do say the darndest things.
Especially when Kazu's got a microphone in their face.
Yeah.
Aw.
Oh my goodness, Jason.
So
Sorry.
you want another good one? So my son is learning to potty train. This is a Dilps episode, so we can talk about our kids a lot.
Yeah.
Son's learning to potty train. He's sitting on the toilet. My daughter walks by and she goes, "Oh, Ash, you have the cutest little penis," and walks away.
Oh
I
my
was
goodness.
dying. My wife has this
Uh.
fucking journal where she like writes a sentence a day, and I was like, "Sierra, that has to be Ash, you have the cutest little penis," and she's like, "No, I'm not doing that."
Oh my. Well, I guess the funniest thing that's happened with Graham recently was that he had a huge poop and it was very smelly. And the cat walks in to the room that I was changing the diaper, immediately throws up on the floor and walks out. So I'm like changing his diaper, and it was a very, very big smelly one. And the cat's like, "What the fuck is this?" And then she immediately throws up on the floor. So I'm just like,
Oh,
"Fuck my life, fuck my life."
Oh
my
man, you better
God.
not let PETA hear this episode. They're gonna come after you, and then they're gonna euthanize your cat.
Well, hey, somebody's got to do it, I guess.
It's PETA. They're probably euthanize the child first.
Yeah.
As a vegan, it's okay to hate PETA. In fact, everybody else should as well. Thank you. That's my TED Talk. So going back to the movie, basically, you got the little soldier boy going off to war, and he basically leaves his mom and his wife. So it's the daughter-in-law, and them, and they're just living in a hut, and they're left to their own devices. They have to provide for themselves. There's basically famine because there was a winter during summer where they're supposed to be growing their crops. So they have to become resourceful. And I won't necessarily say how they make their money, but it's not the most savory of ways. Then somebody returns one of the son's allies alone without the son. And it's like widely accepted that the son is dead. And basically, this is what comes out of this third person entering what has become a very private and secure bond of trust that these women have because of their somewhat nefarious means of garnering fundage. Is that a fair, brief summary?
Absolutely.
I would just like to say it's not exchanging sex for food.
I don't think that's unsavory, though. Just to be clear, prostitution is the oldest form of currency exchange that we have.
Well, I know that's why I want to set the standard. That's not what they did,
Yeah.
because it's unique. It's something you haven't really seen in a movie before.
I haven't, truly. Well, I mean, short of certain things where it's an afterthought. I'll just say it. They're fucking killing people and stealing shit, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, this isn't them killing people for gratification. It's literally just a means to an end. They take the stuff, they sell the stuff, they get the millet, they get the rice, they get to eat.
Well, specifically, they're killing. Okay, so is a samurai a soldier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because the synopsis says that they kill samurais, which I was like, is that a soldier or is that something else? Because essentially they're selling off their armor and their weapons and everything like that for food.
Yeah.
The best part though was when they were killing those samurai soldiers in the water, and like, but they were still like swimming at each other, but they were still like trying to like swim away from each other, like when you're with your brothers or whatever with like the pool noodles in the pool, just trying to smack the crap out of each other. That's
I
what
know.
it
I
get.
was like, are they playing or are they trying to kill each other?
Well, that was like the one gripe I had in terms of I think the sound design was really good in the whole movie.
Sure.
But that scene, because it just kept dropping off. And I get it. It would be this cacophony and it would be distracting and it would be very hard. You wouldn't necessarily be able to hear their discussion about killing them and everything. But for them to go from violently yelling to completely silent to drowning, it was just that was probably the weakest area in that regard. But that's how this guy ends up kind of permeating their circle of trust, which then has ramifications later on. So it's a very important scene. I just think it happens to be probably the weakest in my opinion.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. And yeah, he was splashing around and yelling at each other, and you can tell like some of this stuff was overdubbed for sure.
Oh yeah,
I would like to hear the original. Apparently, they did an English dub for this movie in like 1970 or something. I was like, I would
oh
like to hear how
no,
bad that is.
I bet that's awful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Mikey.
I was just gonna say, so the version we saw on HBO with the subtitles, that's the original audio, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, because there was
That's
a couple
the
of
Criterion
times.
collection version.
Yeah.
Okay, because there was a couple of times where I felt like the dialogue didn't match with what their mouths were doing, but that could have just been ADR or whatever it's called.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, you have to keep in mind they actually shot on a location, so those reeds and things were blowing at all times. There was like a flood at one point. The people had to like live out there in the fucking boonies for a while, and they had to, like entice them to stay around.
The cinematography is something that I took note of almost immediately. And there's so many shots that are so smooth of just running through the reeds that I'm like, how did they get it to where the reeds aren't smacking in front of the camera?
That's just work, dude. That's
Yeah.
all that is like that. Like that's an incredible amount of work to stamp down, to set up a dolly rig, to do all that, and it's beautiful and it's worth it. And one of the crazy things too, think of Day for Night. Think of how fucking shitty most Day for Night is, where you're like, oh, you just put on a shitty filter and we're just gonna all pretend that this is nighttime, even though we know it's not. In this movie, in order to preserve the element of the reeds and that movement and that kind of like unnerve, it almost makes you feel seasick for a certain amount of it when they're running through it, right? You have to compromise because you need a lighter sky behind it so that you can have that kind of silhouetting motion. So you're sacrificing the realism because you could simply tilt the camera down at an angle and you would lose the motion, but you would get a more convincing night shot. And this is one of the times where that artistic element of that really makes it okay. Like I would never criticize this movie for Day for Night because it has those elements that are so just visually beautiful and kind of mesmerizing. It's just a lady who's got a giant vagina tuft running through and a guy with a little pecker flopping around chasing each other. But it looks so good where I'm just sitting there like, I could get a tattoo of the guy with the little dick on one leg and then the big muff on the other leg, and it would be this beautiful piece, you know?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I support that.
Yeah, I was when I was watching this. There's a show that used to come on YouTube and either Sundance or IFC. It was called Every Frame a Painting.
Okay.
And it was just it was strictly about movies and their cinematography. Usually, it would be like one movie, and they would talk about how great it looks. I was like, why did nobody ever do Onibaba for that? Because this movie looks fantastic. You know.
Yeah, my favorite scene, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I hope you guys took mental note of it, is about 3/4 into the movie when one of the women's coming back to their hut and they're coming out of the reeds and the hut is in the foreground and the moon is behind them, but it looks really big
Yeah.
and it's so clear. And I'm like, is that like, did they get that shot on location or is that editing? Like, can they do editing like that in the 60s? It was just, it was so good. And every time the daughter-in-law was, so the first time she ran through the reeds, I'm like, why does she look like she's having a panic attack when she's just walking through the reeds? But then like I loved every running through the reed scene. They had that eerie, like it sounded like a pigeon call when she's running through the reeds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then you kind of understand that she's scared because it's nighttime and she's just freaked out. You know how like when you go to the bathroom, you make a run for it back to your bed before the monster under your bed gets you. I think that's what she was trying to do.
Agreed.
But those running scenes and just her face and like I'm sorry for anybody who's like a film buff and loves old movies, but I rarely see an old movie and think, wow, that acting is phenomenal. Because it's either over the top or like some transatlantic BS. But like these women, even though it was in a different language, their face told the story of everything. And I was really into it. I also took note that when I mentioned earlier that I feel like everything in this movie was intentional. So these women had eyeliner on, which sounds like a weird call out, but it's something to mention because it's 1300s, 1400s in war. They're by themselves, but they wore eyeliner, and the mother's eyeliner points down. The daughter in law's eyeliner comes up like a cat eye. And I have no idea what the connection is, but it just stuck out to me and I made note of it. And I was like, I wonder what that's about.
So that's a really interesting element in terms of also black and white filming. Like you can see how garish a lot of things are that then got subdued very much in black and white. Like look at the Rob Zombie, the new Munster shit. It looks fucking terrible. But the stuff that's in black and white, you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. And if you look actually at Japanese, like, makeup and everything, there's history going back to the 1600s. And it's very interesting to see like what it means culturally, what it means. And also it adds the drama of the movie. It also has a lot of subtext. So yeah, I sent you guys a screenshot of just the mom's eyes and how severe and like haunting they are. And then it's a great mimic to her eyes with the mask, which are so unnatural. But then if you compare them, they look oddly kind of similar. And then going to what you were saying earlier, Mikey, as far as the gals running through the reeds, I thought that was really interesting as it pertains to like, there's always the example, show me, don't tell me. So we don't necessarily know why she's running. She seems frantic. Like you said, she seems more frantic and anxious than she does afraid. Right. And what's interesting is they show it. They show it. I'm intrigued. She explains it. So while it is an explanation rather than a visual explanation, it's interesting because of the way like how differentiated her performance is instead of like clutching her pearls and just shrieking, right? There is more artful ways to show terror. And I think this is one of the really good ways of doing that, where as soon as she said it, I felt like this eureka moment of like, oh, okay, it's not lust, it's not passion, it's not freneticism, it's literally terror, just done in a way that I think is a lot more, true to life in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I was like, where's that screenshot? I went to go look at her text messages. But no, because you mentioned it, and I didn't realize it, but it's totally true. But I feel also that the reed scene with her running, because it happens a lot, because she ends up going to the guy's hut, and oh yeah, I love her eyes.
Oh gosh,
She's just so great. I don't know what she's been in, the actress. I was looking at her stuff, but she was born in the 20s. She did a lot of film in between like the 60s and the 70s. There's one film where she has like really pretty makeup on, and I was like, I want to see that one because it looks really good.
She's
But
actually
anyways.
married to the director. They were so they
Oh, is
were
she?
on everything. It's like this. Did you see how old this director was when he passed away?
Mm-mm.
So he died in
100.
2012. He was 100 years old. His last
wow.
movie that he directed was in 2010. He was directing movies until he was 98 years old.
That's awesome. I want
He
to see
did a
it.
movie called Edo Porn, which I might check out just based on the judging a book by its cover. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
speaking of porn, the male lead actually did do a porno movie in 1981.
Hold
Oh.
on. Edo Porn came out in 81. Dun, dun, dun. Our investigative journalism has blown the lid right off this son of a bitch.
Yeah. He was also in Sword of Doom. Have you seen that one, Jake?
Which one?
Sword of Doom. It's one of the big samurai movies from the 60s and 70s.
No.
It was like one of the few big ones that wasn't directed by Kurosawa.
Interesting.
And it's not Lone Wolf and Cub. But yeah, it's also in the
I
Criterion
love Lone
Collection.
Wolf and Club. We have so much to talk about. Let's hang out, Jason.
Is that on HBO?
Yes, it is. There's like 6 of them, and it's fucking great.
Are the Zatoichi movies on there? Because there's a fuck ton of those too.
Jesus Christ. Oh, you know what Midnight Pulp is good for? That the Japanese scorpion lady in prison movies I told you about. There's a bunch of them on there. Not all of them. The Sword of Doom 1966, not streaming for free, but what? I will definitely check it out.
It was on HBO because it's a Criterion movie
Prime
as well.
for $3.99.
Son of a bitch. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I kind of interrupted.
But I might be using my VPN. Who knows? Maybe in Japan it's streaming on Netflix.
Maybe.
I don't
But
know,
yeah.
but Jason's not allowed on our shows anymore.
Why the fuck
I'm
not?
just
I interrupted Mikey a little bit.
no,
Sorry, I got
I'm just
excited.
kidding. Just kidding. I don't remember what I was saying, anyways. And it wasn't that you interrupted me. It's just now I'm left out because the
We were
boys are
talking about
playing.
the
The boys
ice.
are playing, and here I am again by the
The
swings by
boys are back in
myself.
town. Can you name the band?
Yeah, but
It's not Chubby Elizabeth. It's
Fat Ethel. don't-
Thin Lizzy.
Oh, I don't.
What?
Oh, well,
Thin
Oh,
Lizzy
man.
fucking rips, dog.
okay. I don't know. I'm not a music person.
Well, you
I
will
just-
be after this episode.
I just put on lo-fi and like masturbate furiously.
Have you ever listened to lo-fi covers of old Dragon Ball songs?
No, but I've listened to like really specific lo-fi. There's a song playing in the room next door while you brew coffee in your studio hut apartment.
All right. I'm into it.
But yeah, is that a thing? Lo-fi Dragon
Yeah.
Ball? I'll look it up.
There's good. And then on YouTube for my business email, I have just like synthwave, vaporwave, lo-fi, just stuff I could put on in the background. And so one day I was listening to some lo-fi, and then it switched to a lo-fi cover of Stick to Your Guns, and I was very entertained. So I forgot the artist's name, but if you know it, good. If you don't, Google it.
I don't, but I've seen the playlist for lo-fi for 90s grunge covers. But I digress. So in the film, homegirl wants to go get her muff eaten by the new dick in
Come
town.
on, we know that guy's not eating puss. Like, he's all about his own sexual gratification. He's already like asleep by the time she is.
He certainly does not look like a giving lover. That's for sure.
He's a taker, not a giver.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, he's not eating anything else except for rice. So, so get this. Do you think the mother was doing what she was doing to keep the daughter in her hut, or because she was turned down sexually by, is it Hachi?
Yeah, Hachi was his name. See, I'm more of the thinking that it was all about self-preservation for her.
Agreed.
And she felt like if she left, then she would have nobody to help her, and she's not gonna be able to take the samurais on by herself. And she felt like if she left, then she was gonna be hung out to die. I mean, the being turned down by Hachi didn't help anything, I'm sure. But that was the whole. It was all about, for her. It was just 100% self-preservation at all times.
By the Hachi seduction, I think that she already sees it as a foregone conclusion this girl's going, and this is kind of almost a last-ditch effort to put a wrench in the works.
Yeah.
But I think a huge theme of this movie that I haven't seen a lot of analysis online, correct me if you have, is the moral baseline and the bargaining with which people will justify. These are people murdering other human beings to get by, but they have a baseline where she thinks adultery or these things are heinous crimes. The fact that she is being unfaithful to a dead man, where she thinks that, her sleeping with the guy would be a bridge too far, when it's like, these are murderers, these are thieves, these are lecherous people by other standards, but they still have some kind of moral code that they think is too far. I think it's a super interesting element of it.
It is, and I feel like that was one of her downfalls. That's probably why, I mean, I would guess the demon spirit did inhabit her body, because she was playing God too much. Because if you remember, when the guy who originally has the mask comes, and she essentially tricks him and kills him by having him fall in the hole, she says basically like he deserves it. He kills people, and and I forgot what she had a whole dialogue about it. So she's already justifying that she can kill this person because her impression is he's done XYZ already, when she doesn't actually know. And then like she also is because it's mentioned more than once that the sin of lust is the most severe sin. She tells her daughter that maybe like 2 or 3 times, and they're like, okay, well, people have been doing this for like years. And it's super weird to see, because I kind of, that whole like sex is okay if you're married, to me, I thought it was just like an American Christian thing. And so to see it kind of portrayed in like old school Japanese, because they even mentioned Buddha. So I didn't know that it was like maybe a Buddhist thing. I don't know.
And Hachi's kind of like he's like no, who cares about Buddha's not even real? Who gives a shit? Now, granted, he's probably just trying to justify getting laid, but still, like,
Well, and I think that's a huge element of the idea of weaponizing faith is what she's doing. If she's not telling her simply as fact, she is trying to elicit a response from her. She is being an advocate, basically, right? So this is not just objective truth that she's putting out in the world. She's trying to manipulate this girl into doing things, and that is a type of control and domination and domineering that you see in our society that a lot of people go, oh, but morally are they okay? Simply because something is morally right. I mean, there's lots of like debate you can have where, yeah, okay, the idea of killing another life is wrong, but there are circumstances where abortion is very right. And the fact that people have access to that is very right. But people will use the stance, oh, but we can all agree killing is wrong, right? And then they'll try and backtrack, which is basically she's saying, hey, we can all agree that, that adultery and lust is wrong. But when we pull it back, she's pulling that, the bowstring back to her own purpose and weaponizing it a different way, because basically she's saying this girl's being unfaithful to someone who's dead, who she has no basis of being faithful to, right? I mean, you could see how those kind of mechanisms work and speak broadly. And I guess in modern America, we're living in feudal Japan. It's crazy.
I see. I'm also not even entirely sure that she believes her son is dead. I mean, because it's clear she doesn't trust Hachi at all to start with, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
doesn't really give anybody reasons to trust him. He's clearly, it seems like he may have been a deserter or just kind of getting away as well.
Agreed.
So I feel I also think on top of what you were saying, I also feel like she doesn't completely has given up hope that her son is dead yet. So I was also thinking that. He's probably dead, I would think, but it seems like she's still kind of holding out hope that he maybe is coming back. If nothing else, that would be more, insurance for her for self-preservation, which is what she's all about the entire movie, because she can't grow crops. The only thing she can do is kill, steal, and get millet,
We should make
Yeah.
a shirt like that, like John Cena, going back to the jorts discussion earlier. He had like the hustle, loyalty, and respect.
Yeah.
Kill, skill, get millet.
Yeah. Cool. Slashers at Redbubble. It's
Yeah. I'll start designing this right now if my computer doesn't have a seizure from having too many tabs open. Mikey, you were gonna say something?
I was, but it was going to be a tasteless joke.
Let me ask you this. Which ending do you like better? Where the guy in Hachi's hut is the actual son, or where it's just another deserter? Which is more poetic in your view?
What guy in Hachi's hut? Oh, the one that
So
was
the guy
stealing
who
his
kills
food?
Hachi. Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's very clear he is just referred to in a lot of the media and press clippings and descriptions of the film that I saw as the deserter. Doesn't have a name, but it's never referred to as, the old hag's son. I like to think of it, how interesting would that be if the guy did come back? He did escape. Hachi is a liar, and his first, act upon returning is not to go see his wife. It's not to go see his mother. It's to get revenge on this guy. I think
Yeah.
there's certainly, I don't think that's what the intention is, but it's a nice thought prompt.
No, absolutely. It is. It kind of comes out of nowhere too. Like he gets what I mean. Morally, the movie shows that Hachi has to go. That's how
Yeah.
that's how these things will go in stories. But he just kind of he like comes home. He's waiting for her to show up so he can get laid, and then he comes home and it's like, oh, this is your food, and now I'm going to kill you dead. It would be really poetic, but that a lot more depth if it did. This movie would be even more heartbreaking too if it did in fact if it was her son and her husband. But I kind of like that it's just sort of left in the air as to who this person just showed up and it murdered Hachi.
Agreed, because I do think there's like a poetic justice in the idea that she's done this, holding this candle for her son. Everything, then not having having her son back to see the horrors of what she's become and what she's done, and speaking to kind of like the dregs that she's become. But then also I do think that it's poetic in like the movie The Strangers. Why did I pick, like, why are you coming to kill me? Because you were home. Why is Hachi killed? Because he just happens to open the fucking door. There's something kind of beautiful in that opportunism, I guess, that Hachi has kind of profited from, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that's what everybody remembers the most from strangers is the fact that you just happened to be there, and that's why you're dead now. You know.
Mikey, what you got to say about that?
I didn't even put that piece together when I was watching it. Honestly, I thought, oh, okay, Hachi's dead. Um, I don't know. I would like to think that it was the son, because if you think about it, well, we don't even know what really happens to the mother. Because if the mother's out of the picture, Hachi's out of the picture, then the daughter-in-law is kind of screwed, because she kind of comes off as someone that needs a leader, whether it's her mother-in-law or the guy that she's hooking up with. She doesn't really seem to be very strong-willed to be on her own. So if it's not her ex-husband, then if she kills her mother-in-law, which is what she was kind of in the process of doing at the end, she might be in trouble. But if it is her husband, then maybe there's hope for a semi decent following to the movie after the credits roll.
Yeah, and honestly, like I mean, imagine that situation. That's going to be a lot of couples counseling if not only did you cheat on me, but also you killed my mom after she was disfigured trying to stop you from cheating on me. That's tough.
Oh yeah, and what was the last line that was spoken in the movie?
Sup, sluts?
Deuces.
Fuck bitches, get millet. No, it was
No, I'm already designing the kill, steal, and eat millet shirt. You can't change it now.
That's what I was gonna say when I said it was gonna be a tasteless joke. I'm sorry, that's why I didn't want to say it. The last line of the movie is, I'm not a demon.
F2 mame.
I'm not a demon, I'm a human.
Which goes back to our Danny Elfman, I am not a ghost without a soul.
Well, I was just thinking about what the church tells gay people. So
ooh.
Too serious?
No, I'm into it.
So that kind of rang to me, because when I first came out and I talked to the church about it, they were like, oh, the reason why it's a sin is because when you're a gay, there's a demon living inside of you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Oh, neat.
So when I heard her say that, I was like, oh shit. And she's weaponizing religion, and she's the one ultimately that pays the price for it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Because I mean, who's worse, Hachi or the Onibaba, the old demon? Like, which one of those characters is worse, really? At least Hachi's, like brazen about it. He's not making any apologies about it. She's sort of being sneaky and underhanded this entire movie.
Well, my thing is, and this is actually one of my faults, is that I see the best in everybody. So with Hachi, he's not trying to hide that he just wants to have sex. And he even tells the mom, he's like, you can have her. We'll just be friends that fuck, pretty much.
Yeah.
And with the mom, she's so desperate because this is her livelihood on the line. And at this point, she even has a breakdown. She was like, don't take my daughter. And it's like, well, she's not really your daughter. She's your daughter-in-law to what we assume is your deceased son. So that relationship's already kind of strange, kind of strained. But she's just desperate, because if she leaves, and she's screwed, and her life, like, basically she's gonna die if the girl leaves her. So I understand the intent of both sides. It was just, you mess with the wrong thing and the demon comes after you, and then you get a mask stuck on your face.
I'm not gonna lie though, when she buffs out, like, I knew it was going to happen because I've seen this movie a couple times before. But when she did burst out of the reeds and the whole demon mask with her arms spread out, it did make me jump a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, like it's such an awesome shot there. I mean, it's behind you right now, actually, Mikey.
Yeah, it was. It's like one of the best scenes, because she's like floating towards her too.
Yeah,
so it's so good. I feel like even before I knew what this movie was, I've seen these shots. So
oh, sure.
These shots are kind of pop culture at this point.
Oh yeah,
I would agree. That's what we're talking about, like the zeitgeist of, and like the familiarity and seeing these images. And also, like, an Oni mask is not something that's unique. This movie is not the only movie that has an Oni mask. It's got deep culture. There's kabuki theater. There's all sorts of things. You see tattoos of it. There's all sorts of stuff that like goes back with a very rich history. Very modernly, you see a lot of the Demon Slayer show. They have Oni masks and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it's kind of like that beautiful simplicity of just distilling it down to the simplest parts. one of the reasons why like the original Halloween is so effective. Wearing a mask is in and of itself not unique, but it's what's happening with the mask, how it's presented, almost that beautiful simplicity that makes this kind of greater theme where you're not just looking on the, for lack of a better term, like the surface level, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's and this mask, it's just it really stands out to me how crazy, and especially at the very end when she's like freaking out, like
Yeah.
the scene behind you right now, Jake.
And
Actually,
you.
and
You
yeah,
have the animated version.
yeah,
And that's
right.
the scene that I was talking about, is when she's actually trying to get it off. Like that I've seen tattooed on people. I've seen it a lot of places. But I mean, unless that stance is famous also, but
No, like it's a very, very iconic, especially I would assume in Japanese cinema. Like this is just a very, very iconic shot and mask.
yeah.
Now if you guys were running a video store and you couldn't have a foreign film section, but you had a copy of Onibaba, what genre would you put? Would you put it in horror section, or would you put it like drama or war or action? Like where would you put this movie? Like what would you categorize this movie as?
I would put it as horror.
I have no problem with that either. I think that it's a great testament to what the horror genre can be, because I think it's very easy to say, oh, it's not horror, like hardly anybody dies. The people that die aren't killed in what you would characterize as a horrific way. It's simply in a way that's unfortunate, or it's a victim of circumstance. But I think that's one of the big takeaways of the movie to me, is that negotiation, the moral relativism, the fact that the mom is willing to literally murder, but then like the cosmos punishes her for her dishonesty. Like there's so many interesting parts of it. And I think that psychological element really is horror. But what about you, Jason? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would go back and forth between some of the other stuff. I think ultimately this is a horror movie. I think it has enough elements in here but yeah, like I said, it's what the horror thing can be. It always kind of bothers me once any movie gets critical acclaim. Well, it's not a horror movie; it's just a subversive thriller. I was like, no, Silence of the Lambs is a horror movie. Get over it. I'm sorry it won all those Oscars, but it's a horror movie. If you don't like horror, sorry,
Yeah.
but that's what it is.
I mean, I said horror pretty quickly, but that's because I actually thought about that at length while watching it. Because I was like, but you have also the horrors of war, and it's just the way that it's shot. Can you define a movie as horror just based on the cinematography? Because I feel like this is it.
The setting of this movie is almost a character in itself. Like it's almost like the Reeds are always constantly watching all the characters constantly and seeing what's unfolding. It did like the Reeds almost feel like characters in this movie themselves, as there's like the constant
I was trying to explain to my friend at work about the movie, and I was like, so they're in a field. I don't know what kind of field it is. It might be a rice paddy. I don't know what it is, because I didn't finish. I took 2 days to watch the movie because I have to be in bed by a certain time because my kids are in school. Gotcha. And I was like, okay.
No judgment, dog. No judgment.
I was like, it's kind of like the Japanese version of like how America has cornfields.
Yeah. Children of the Onibaba, or he who Onibaba's behind the rose.
Children of the Reeds.
Yeah.
But I think that it's also meant to be familiar enough, but also ethereal, and also smothering, and also vacant. There's so many ways you can look at it. And it's weird because like there have been few movies where I've thought like I'm just eating my own farts on this show, where I'm like, I'm pontificating and I'm waxing philosophical. And, I feared that I was treading very comfortable areas of fact and everything, where it's like, oh, this is typical analysis. Of course, everybody would ride this movie, but I really do think that there is a lot to be said about this movie and the way that it's presented, where I really just unabashedly love it. And I think that everybody should see it. This is not one of the ones where I'm like, like check it out if you're into this subset. No. I think that this is something that should be on everyone's list, because I know that there are people who listen to the show who don't necessarily listen to the movies that we do. This is the exception, I think.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the few Criterion movies I think we've done on the show. Like this, Dead Dudes in the House, I think has also come in the Criterion collection next month. But yeah, this is certainly one I think that everybody should. I mean, it's not, and it doesn't feel long. It's 100 minutes long, essentially. Like it's hour 43. It doesn't feel that long, as you would think, because sometimes these like short three-handed movies can feel like just a torturous,
Oh yeah.
even the really good ones. This one doesn't feel like I can't think of anything that should really be edited out. Like I could tighten up or shorten it. Nothing. Everything in this movie just works. I feel like
It does. And yeah, because on my HBO Max, I looked at the time and it was like an hour and 40 something minutes. And when I was watching it for the first night, I was watching it and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. It didn't seem like much was happening. And then I looked and it was already like an hour had gone by. And I was like, that didn't feel like an hour.
no.
So it goes by pretty quickly.
Another example, and I think that this might appeal to a lot of people, is The Witch. The Witch had a pacing that was almost frustrating at parts because it felt like you knew something could happen, but it felt like nothing necessarily was happening for a lot of it. And it was almost that deprivation. I heard recently about a bit that, and Jason, you might appreciate this, Mick Foley did at one point when he was in WCW, where he started acting like he had like abandoned extreme pro wrestling and was all about being very by the books. And so there's a match where he was going against, I think it was Tommy Dreamer, and he just kept doing like side headlock takedowns and shit, right? And
who was he at that point? Which one of his characters?
He was Cactus Jack. And so that was the thing. People were so frustrated. And so the idea of this match, it ends up with him kind of breaking this mold and beating Terry Funk with a flaming chair. But the idea of not giving people what they want, right? So it felt like with The Witch, I got this tension of like, what is fucking happening? But it left me feeling like I don't ever want to revisit this, because the craft of the movie is meant to make me feel distressed in that way.
Sure.
This I would rewatch tomorrow. In fact, as I was watching it, I told Sierra, I was like, hey, if you want to watch this with me, I think that you might get into it, and I'll watch this tomorrow. And she was like, I don't give a fuck. It's not the Moulin Rouge. You can suck a dick.
Yeah, like this is a very, very tight movie, I feel like.
Tight as in like tight, and also tight as in like
both.
Just for clarifying.
Yes.
Well, I have a question, I guess.
Okay.
Does this count as trashic, classic, or what was the third one?
Tragic.
Tragic.
Oh man, I love that scale. I'm kind of sad that we abandoned it, but I understand why we did. I think this is inarguably a classic. Like, it's in the Criterion Collection for a reason. Like, I really think this is one of the most artful films we've ever done.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so stoked that you had pitched it, but I'm absolutely open to other analyses.
Yeah, I'm absolutely 100% on this being a classic. I know the director, was it Kanetko Shindo? I think it's actually follow-up movie was another sort of horror folk Japanese movie. It's also on HBO Max. It's escaped me the name of it, but it's also another like folk horror. This was actually Guillermo del Toro did a top 10 Criterion movies, and this was in his top 10.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about Daikon to Ninjin, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe that might be it.
I totally just Googled it.
About the killer daikon radish.
See, I don't Google my laptop. I do it on my phone every once in a while, but I feel like an asshole. Like, I feel like, is he texting somebody right now or on slashers? What? Come on, be mindful of everybody's time, Jason.
Not
the
me.
only people who we text is each other. We know this.
Pretty much.
But yeah, this is 100% a classic. Like I said, it's in the Criterion Collection for a reason. Yeah, this is just everything about this movie just is great, and I hope more people need to see it. I feel like I'm sure a lot of people have, but I feel like the common populace, people that listen to the show, really would get a kick out of watching this movie for sure.
Oh yeah,
it might not be the Toxic Avenger, but you can't just keep watching those Arrow movies like Colobos every day.
How dare you? Was that a dig at the Call Your Girlfriend Colobos episode?
No, it was not. I actually enjoy that movie. It's a good time.
No, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no secret. Creature of the Black Lagoon is also a classic. So who takes the throne here?
Oh shit, we're going back to the old rules. Fuck you. No. No. You blindsided me. That sucks. That sucks hard.
My hat's off to you, Mikey. I can see you got the biggest shit-eating grin I've ever seen in my life.
Dude,
I mean,
I do that all the time to people in depositions where I'll be like, Bubba, and they're like, yeah, and then I go, Shazam, Uno reverse card, bitch. And I cannot recall the last time it happened to me. I'll let Jason, do I have to answer first?
I'll go first. Honestly, I think this is a better movie. Of course, when you go back to entertainment value, Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's probably more fun. Uh, I watched it recently when I found you guys were doing that. I don't know. I've also got that weird nostalgia for this movie when I was sick in high school.
So that's the tough thing, because you actually have nostalgia, whereas Mikey and I are newly initiated. So I don't want to sound like a poser just siding with it, but it is a very tempting argument to say that this movie is better.
Well, I'll go next.
Please do.
When you talk about Creature from the Black Lagoon, when you talk about Onibaba, the strengths that both of them have are very similar. Cinematography is a huge thing in both. However, while Creature from the Black Lagoon is going to be more universally universally
Ooh, hey, I see what you did there.
accepted as entertaining and something that more people will probably take enjoyment out of, I feel like Onibaba is going to stick with me longer.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
There's something thrilling in something new. The Creature from the Black Lagoon is something where I've grown up with it. I have a tattoo of a character that's based on it, so it's very easy for me to have a deep affinity for it, right? But I do think there's something to be said about like what's trying to be achieved, and it's this movie, its artistry, its presentation, the themes that it hits on are themes that I don't see enough in the world, basically. I'm very comfortable, I guess, saying that I think that this is a better movie, even though I will be the first to say Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of my first loves of horror. I think it's a great movie, and I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying I think this is a little bit more, especially in this season of my life. If I was a kid, I don't know that I would appreciate this. If I was the same age seeing this as the age I was when I saw Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's a hands down for Creature. But I think there's also something to be said about like being an older man and dealing with themes of mortality, and I like having sympathy for this woman who's like a brittle ass old woman who has to now deal with the fact that she has no income, she has no lifeline, she has no son, she has no daughter who cares for her. Like there's a lot of things you can get into with that.
I appreciate your candor. I know it was hard for you. You may leave the stand.
Thank you.
I knew before recording, I was like, I'm going to bring that back.
It's good because honestly, next week is going to be a really easy win for this for Onibaba, but it'll still be fun to have that.
I'm
episode.
super interested to see what you guys got. Like, I'm super interested to see what the pitch is for next week.
Well, remember, there's 3 categories and there's a throne for each. So it's probably not even going to go up against Onibaba.
Dude, what's funny is we could fill 2 of the 3 slots just next week.
That's true. Okay, you're right. There is a possibility one of the 2 films could go against Onibaba.
Oh no, I'm kidding, because you have Tragic and Tragic, which are unaccounted for. So we could fill out the 3 if the 2 movies we do are bad and worse.
Perfect. But that was good. I think if you haven't seen this movie, guys, go watch it. I purposely didn't say much about the story. Honestly, the story doesn't have much to spoil, but it's just so good, so easy to watch. Watch it at night when everybody's at home in bed. Just do yourself a favor and enjoy it.
Watch it in the dark. As dark as you can make your home. Watch it in the dark. Do it. It's a good time. I promise you.
And honestly, I think maybe now that Jason said it that way, I think maybe this isn't an episode of the Tales from the Crypt. I think it's rather Are You Afraid of the Dark with dicks and vaginas and boobs, simply because that imagery of like the beginning. Yeah. But get out there, watch that shit. We got Doug, who's having a feature film release coming up very shortly in October. Very likely by the time anybody listens to this episode, that would be The Ancient Past. So go check out Trash Juice. He has 2 shows on B Movie TV. I might start doing those again. It was just hard with the timetable because we're doing it literally week to week and the things would change. But it is a great channel full of awesome stuff made by creators who are very passionate about their work. We have the Red Bubble, which I just finished the design, Kill, Steal, and Get Millet. If you would like it, go to slasherspod.redbubble.com. If you really like this movie, I'm dead serious. I think I might do an Oni mask variant of the Goon Show. Let me know if you'd love it. Slasherspod@gmail.com or slasherspod on any of your social media platforms. Guys, you have anything to plug before we get out of here?
No, like and review the show. We're gonna put this on YouTube, so if you want to, like and review that, that'd be great. You can rate on Spotify now, which is also pretty great. But other than that, that's nothing that I want to push. Mikey.
No, I don't think you mentioned Patreon, so you can find us on patreon.com/slasherspod, Instagram @slasherspod, and then Facebook. What is our Facebook group name? I can't remember. Mutant Goons from Beyond.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, find us there too.
8 handles that one for the most part. Sorry.
Yeah, go stress 8 out with inappropriate posts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all that we have.
All right. And so, you know what? I'm going to start doing something that I see a lot of people do that rip shit off, which is where they take 5-star reviews off of their stuff. So we already did the one of my favorite reviews that we've ever done on the show. I don't know if I've ever read it. It's a 1-star review. It's titled "Fun, Entertaining Show!"
Yeah. !
These guys really do their research and make it a fun listen. Keep up the good work. I don't know that they realize that 1 star is not putting us in first place. It's quite literally the worst, but we absolutely love the review. So please do continue leaving the good reviews. I would really love it. So please, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere, it does help. And honestly, at this point of our lives, we're trying to create content for you guys that has subgenres and everything, so that we're giving you diversity. We're giving you consistent weekly content. And we love doing it, but it also helps to know that people are listening. And I know that we're in a very, very oversaturated market. So for Jason, for Mikey, for Aid, who's not here but is probably going to lament me putting up another goddamn design on slasherspod.redbubble.com. This is Jake saying goodbye and good die.
Bye.
Bye.